The morning alarm echoed through the metal corridors of Vestan Reach Station. Elena Vasquez rolled out of her narrow bunk and pulled on her uniform. As the captain of the colony's defense force, she always started her day before the sun rose, over the asteroid belt. Not that there was much of a sun here. The small red dwarf star barely gave enough light to see by. Even on the brightest days, Elena walked through the station's main corridor. Workers were already heading to their shifts in the mines. Children ran past her on their way to school, their laughter bouncing off the metal walls. These kids had never seen a real planet. To them, this cold rock floating in space was home. The colony had been here for 37 years now. What started as a small mining operation had grown into a real settlement. 50,000 people called Vestan Reach home. They mined rare metals from the asteroids around them. The work was hard and dangerous, but it paid well. More importantly, it gave them freedom. Out here on the edge of known space, they made their own rules. Elena reached the command center and found Administrator Chen already at work. David Chen was a thin man with gray hair who never seemed to sleep. He had been running the civilian side of the colony for 15 years. While Elena protected the people, Chen made sure they had food, air, and power. Morning reports, Chen said without looking up from his screens. Asteroid Mining Team 7 found a new vein of titanium steel ore. The water recyclers are working at 98% efficiency, and we have visitors coming in. Elena poured herself coffee from the machine. The coffee was terrible, but it was hot and had caffeine. What kind of visitors? HFY Trading, ship. They're asking permission to dock at the commercial station. Elena nodded. The HFY were reptilian aliens who traded throughout this part of space. They were good business partners. They bought human-mined metals and sold them food and supplies that were hard to make in space. The lizard-like aliens were honest in their dealings and never caused trouble. Tell them they can dock at Port 7, Elena said. Same rules as always. No weapons, no more than 10 crew members on the station at once. Chen typed the message. They're also bringing news from the inner systems. Apparently there's been some conflict in the Rigel sector. Something about the Talnari expanding their territory again. The Talnari were bad news. Elena had read the reports about them in her military briefings. They were a species that conquered other worlds and made slaves of the people they defeated. So far, they had stayed far away from human space. Elena hoped it stayed that way. The day passed like most others. Elena inspected the defense systems around the colony. They had laser cannons mounted on the larger asteroids and a small fleet of patrol ships. It was not much, but it was enough to deal with pirates or the occasional hostile alien scout ship. The defenses were really just for show. Vestan Reach was so far from anywhere important that nobody bothered them. The closest human military base was 3 weeks away by faster-than-light travel. If real trouble came, they would be on their own for a long time. Elena S patrol took her to the outer ring of the colony. Here, smaller asteroids had been turned into family homes. Windows looked out into the star field. Children pressed their faces against the glass, watching ships come and go. This was the part of her job Elena loved most, protecting these families who had chosen to make their lives out here in the dark. She stopped at the Morrison family's asteroid home. Tom Morrison worked in the deep mines while his wife Sarah taught at the colony school. Their twin boys, Jake and Sam, were 8 years old and full of energy. Captain Vasquez, Jake called out as she entered their small living room. Did you see the HFY ship? It's huge. Not as big as a human battleship, Sam added. Right, Captain? Elena smiled. That's right. Human ships are the biggest and strongest in the galaxy. Sarah Morrison brought Elena tea. How are things, Elena? Any word from Earth lately? The last supply ship brought letters and data packets. Everything seems peaceful in human space. The colonies are growing. Trade is good. Nothing to worry about. That evening, Elena joined Chen for dinner in the officers' mess. The HFY traders had completed their business and were preparing to leave. Their captain, a 7-foot-tall reptile named Skath, had stopped by to pay his respects before departing. Your colony grows stronger each time we visit, Skath had told them. We are pleased to trade with such industrious people. Now, as they ate their meal of synthesized protein and vegetables grown in the colony's hydroponic farms, Elena and Chen talked about the future. The colony was doing well. Population was growing. The mines were producing more ore than ever before. Some families had even started talking about expanding to nearby star systems. "We might need to build a proper shipyard soon," Chen said. "We're importing too many ships and parts. It would be cheaper to build them here." Elena agreed. "We could use more patrol ships too. Maybe even a proper military vessel. Just in case." "You think there's trouble coming?" Chen asked. Elena shrugged. "There's always trouble somewhere in the galaxy. Better to be ready for it." Neither of them knew how right Elena would be. At that very moment, a Talnari war fleet was moving through space toward their sector. The aliens had studied the reports from their scouts. They knew about the human colony with its rich mines and small defenses. To the Talnari, it looked like easy prey. The next morning started like any other, like workers went to their jobs, children went to school. Elena made her rounds of the defenses. Chen managed the 1,000 small problems that kept a space colony running. The only sign that anything was different came from the communications center. The technician on duty, a young woman named Lisa Park, noticed something odd on the long-range sensors. "There's a group of ships about 6 hours out," she reported to Elena. "They're big, much bigger than anything we've seen before." Elena felt a cold feeling in her stomach. "How big?" 15 ships, maybe 20. The largest one is reading as big as a space station." Elena ran to the command center. Chen was already there, staring at the sensor readings with a worried expression on his face. "They're not answering our communication requests," Chen said, "and they're not showing up in any of our databases." Elena looked at the approaching ships on the screen. They were still too far away to see clearly, but the sensors told her everything she needed to know. These were warships, lots of them, and they were coming straight for Vestan Reach. She thought about the children pressing their faces against windows, watching ships come and go. She thought about the families who had made their homes here in the dark between the stars. She thought about Tom Morrison working in the deep mines and Sarah Morrison teaching school to kids who had never seen a real planet. Elena reached for the communication controls. It was time to send a message to Earth. A message that would change everything for the galaxy. The alien fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel right at the edge of the Vestan system. Elena watched from the command center as 20 massive warships appeared on her screens. Each ship was bigger than anything humans had built. The largest vessel was like a floating city, bristling with weapons and covered in armor plating. War-Prime. Zeth Cole stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds. He was tall and thin with gray skin and 4 arms. His species, the Talnari, had conquered 43 different worlds in the last century. They were very good at war. Zeth Cole looked at the sensor readings of the human colony. Small, weak. This would be easy. The humans had only a few patrol ships and some defense platforms. His fleet could destroy everything here in less than an hour. "Communications officer," Zeth Cole commanded. "Open a channel to the human settlement." Elena felt her hands shaking as the alien transmission came through. The face on her screen was like nothing she had ever seen before. The creature had yellow eyes and a mouth full of sharp teeth. When it spoke, its voice was cold and commanding. "I am War-Prime Zeth Cole of the Talnari hegemony," the alien said. "You will surrender your colony immediately. Your people will become workers in the great Talnari Empire. You have 1 hour to decide." Elena looked around the command center. Chen stood beside her, his face pale. The technicians at their stations stared at the screen in fear and anger. Everyone knew what surrender meant. They had heard the stories about other species that had been conquered by the Talnari. Slavery, their children taken away, their culture destroyed. "We need time to evacuate our civilians," Elena said. "There are families here. Children." Zethicol's laugh was like metal scraping against metal. "Your young will make excellent workers when they grow up. They will learn to serve their Talnari masters. This is the honor we give to conquered species." "And if we refuse?" Elena asked. "Then you will die. all of you. We have destroyed many worlds that would not accept the gift of Talnari rule. The transmission ended. Elena stood in the silence of the command center, feeling the weight of 50,000 lives on her shoulders. Around her, people waited for orders. Chen was the first to speak. The quantum communicator? Elena nodded. Lisa, send the emergency signal to Colonial Defense Command. Full priority. Tell them we're under attack by hostiles with superior numbers and firepower. Lisa Park's fingers flew over her controls. The quantum communicator was humanity's most advanced technology. It could send messages instantly across any distance. Every human colony had one, hidden and protected. Message sent, Captain. Earth, we'll know what's happening here in real time. How long until help arrives? Chen asked. Elena did the math in her head. The nearest Colonial Defense Force base is 3 weeks away at maximum speed. Maybe 4 weeks depending on what ships they can spare. We need to evacuate the civilians, Chen said. Get them to the transport ships and send them to safety. Where? Elena asked. That alien fleet will catch any ship trying to leave the system. And even if some escape, where can they go? The nearest human world is 6 weeks away and the fastest transport we have. Chen stared at the tactical display. So what do we do? Elena looked around the command center. These people had followed her orders for 5 years. They trusted her to protect their families. She thought about Jake and Sam Morrison, 2 8-year-old boys who had never seen a real planet. She thought about all the children on Vestan Reach who called this place home. We fight, she said. The Talnari had given them 1 hour. Elena used every minute of it. She sent emergency messages to all sections of the colony. The miners came up from the asteroids. The technicians prepared the defense systems. Families moved to the most protected areas of the station. What Elena did not tell anyone was that the defenses would not be enough. The human weapons were designed to deal with pirates and small raiders. The Talnari fleet could destroy the entire colony with a single bombardment. But Elena had spent 5 years on Vestan Reach. She knew things about the colony that even Chen did not know. The miners had built more than just homes in the asteroids. They had created tunnels and hidden chambers, storage areas for emergency supplies, backup life support systems, places where people could hide if the worst happened. And there were other preparations. Weapons caches hidden throughout the asteroid belt, mining explosives that could be turned into bombs, industrial equipment that could become weapons in the right hands. Elena had been planning for this day without even knowing it. The hour passed. The Talnari fleet moved closer to the colony. War-Prime Zethkol opened communications again. Your time is over, humans. What is your answer? Elena stood in front of the communication screen. Behind her, the command center was full of people. Miners, technicians, teachers, doctors. All the people who made Vestan Reach work. All the people who had chosen to make their lives in the darkness between the stars. Our answer is no, Elena said. We will not surrender. We will not become your slaves. This is our home and we will defend it. Zethkol's yellow eyes narrowed. Then you have chosen death. We will make your destruction slow, so that other worlds will learn the price of defying the Talnari hegemony. The alien fleet opened fire. The first barrage hit the outer defense platforms. Elena watched as installations she had inspected just yesterday vanished in balls of fire. The Talnari weapons were incredibly powerful. Each shot could destroy a city block. But they were not shooting at empty space. Hidden in the smaller asteroids around the colony, human defenders activated their own weapons. Laser cannons and missile launchers that had been disguised as mining equipment opened fire on the alien ships. The Talnari were surprised. Their sensors had detected the main defense platforms, but not these hidden weapons. Several alien ships took damage before they could respond. Zeth, Cole roared in anger. How many weapons do these primitives have? His tactical officer studied the sensor readings. We are detecting weapons fire from 47 different locations. These humans have turned their entire asteroid belt into a fortress. Destroy them all, Zethkol commanded. The battle began in earnest. The Talnari had bigger ships and more powerful weapons. But the humans had advantages too. They knew every rock and tunnel in the asteroid belt. They could hide their ships and weapons among the floating mountains of stone and metal. Elena coordinated the defense from the command center deep inside the main station. Reports came in from all over the colony. Families taking shelter in the protected areas. Mining teams using their equipment to fight back against Talnari landing parties. Children helping to carry ammunition and supplies through the tunnel. Networks. The enemy landed troops on several of the larger asteroids. The Talnari soldiers were tough and well armed, but they found themselves fighting in an environment they did not understand. The humans used the asteroid tunnels like a three-dimensional battlefield. They could attack from above, below, or from any side. They knew which passages led where and which areas could be sealed off or flooded with poisonous gas. For the first time in decades, the Talnari found themselves in a fight they could not win quickly. As the battle raged on, word of the attack spread throughout the galaxy. Other alien species received reports of the fighting at Vestan Reach. Most expected the humans to be crushed within hours. That was how the Talnari always won their wars. But hours passed, and the humans kept fighting. Days passed, and they were still fighting. The galaxy began to pay attention. 3 days into the battle, War Prime Zethkal realized he had made a terrible mistake. What should have been a simple conquest had turned into the bloodiest fight of his military career. His invasion force of 2 million Talnari soldiers was being held back by 50,000 humans who refused to give up. Elena moved through the tunnel system under the main colony, checking on her defenders. She had not slept in 60 hours. Her uniform was torn and dirty, and there was dried blood on her face from when an explosion had thrown her against a metal wall. But her eyes were still sharp and her voice still steady when she gave orders. "Report from Sector 7, she said into her communicator. "We lost mining platform Delta," came the reply from Lieutenant Torres, "but we made them pay for it. At least 200 enemy soldiers down, and we destroyed one of their troop transport ships." Elena nodded grimly. The humans were trading space for casualties. Every position they lost cost the Talnari more soldiers than they could afford. It was not a strategy that could win the war, but it was making the enemy pay a price they had not expected. In the school that had been turned into a field hospital, Sarah Morrison worked alongside Dr. Patel to treat wounded defenders. Her twin boys, Jake and Sam, helped by carrying supplies and water to the injured. The 8-year-old children moved through the chaos with a calmness that would have amazed their parents if there had been time to think about it. "More wounded coming in from Asteroid 12, Sam reported to his mother. "Tommy Chen says they need more bandages." Sarah looked at her son. These children had grown up fast in the last 3 days. They had seen things no child should see, but they had not broken. Instead, they had found ways to help. The Morrison twins were not the only ones. All over the colony, children were carrying messages, bringing food to fighters, and helping care for the wounded. Tom Morrison was deep in the mines with his crew, preparing what they called mining charges, but what everyone knew were really bombs. The miners had intimate knowledge of every tunnel and chamber in the asteroid belt. They were using that knowledge to turn the entire colony into one giant trap. "Shaped charges in Tunnel Complex 47 are ready," Tom reported to Elena over the communicator. "If the enemy tries to advance through that sector, we can bring down about 500,000 tons of rock on their heads." The Talnari soldiers were learning to fear the dark tunnels. They were used to fighting on planets with wide open spaces, where their superior numbers and firepower gave them the advantage. Here in the asteroid belt, combat was close and brutal. Humans would appear from hidden passages, attack with whatever weapons they could find, and then disappear back into the maze of tunnels. Mining equipment had been turned into weapons of war. Industrial lasers designed for cutting through rock were now used to slice through Talnari armor. Construction robots carried explosives into enemy positions. Even the atmosphere processors had been weaponized, flooding occupied areas with toxic gases that human defenders could survive with their breathing masks, but that were deadly to the invading aliens. Administrator Chen had moved his command post to a reinforced chamber deep inside the main asteroid. From there, he coordinated the civilian resistance. The colony's normal government had vanished, replaced by a war organization where everyone from doctors to teachers had become soldiers. Food supplies holding steady, Chen reported to Elena. The vertical farms in the lower levels are still producing. Water recycling at 80% efficiency. Power systems running on backup fusion reactors. What Chen did not say, but what both he and Elena knew, was that they could not keep this up forever. Every day of fighting cost them people they could not replace. Every bomb they used was one less they had for tomorrow. Every weapon that broke was one they could not fix. But the Talnari were suffering too. Zeth Cole's casualties were mounting at a rate he had never experienced. His soldiers were elite troops who had conquered worlds across the galaxy, but they were not prepared for this kind of warfare. The humans did not fight like other species the Talnari had conquered. They did not surrender when surrounded. They did not break when their defenses were overrun. Instead, they seemed to become more dangerous when cornered. These humans are insane, Zeth Cole's ground commander reported. Yesterday, a group of their children lured one of our patrols into a trap and killed 20 soldiers with homemade explosives. Children, war prime. They are using their young as weapons. Zeth Cole studied the reports from the battle. His tactical computer said the humans could not possibly hold out much longer. They were outnumbered 40-1. Their weapons were inferior. Their defenses had been battered by days of bombardment. Yet they continued to fight. On the 7th day of the battle, the humans launched their most daring attack yet. Elena led a team of volunteers and captured Talnari vehicles through the enemy fleet. Their target was one of the smaller alien warships that had been damaged in the fighting and was undergoing repairs. The attack force consisted of 30 humans. They were miners, teachers, mechanics, and shopkeepers. None of them were professional soldiers, but all of them had learned to fight in the crucible of the last week. Elena's team reached the alien ship and fought their way aboard. The Talnari crew was shocked to find humans inside their vessel. In all their years of conquest, no enemy had ever been bold enough to attack a Talnari warship directly. The humans planted explosives throughout the ship and then fought their way back out. 23 of the 30 attackers made it home. The Talnari warship exploded 3 hours later, taking another ship with it in the blast. The destruction of 2 warships by a handful of human volunteers sent shockwaves through the Talnari fleet. These were not the actions of a defeated people begging for mercy. These were the tactics of warriors who intended to make their enemies pay for every victory. As the second week of fighting began, Elena received reports from her scouts in the outer system. More Talnari ships were arriving. Reinforcements. The enemy was doubling down on their conquest of Vestan Reach. Elena called a meeting of her surviving officers in the deep command bunker. The faces around the table were tired and dirty, but still determined. These people had held off an alien invasion for 10 days. They had shown the galaxy that humans would not go quietly into slavery. Intel reports say they have another fleet arriving, Elena told the group. 40 ships this time. We hurt them, badly, but they're bringing in enough firepower to crack this asteroid belt open like an egg. Lieutenant Torres spoke up. How long until Colonial Defense Force arrives? Still at least 2 weeks, Elena replied. Maybe more. Earth is sending everything they can, but it takes time to cross interstellar space. Dr. Patel, who had joined the military command after treating hundreds of wounded, asked the question everyone was thinking. Can we hold out that long? Elena looked around the table. These people had already done the impossible. They had shown that humans could stand up to one of the galaxy's most feared military powers. But everyone in the room knew the truth. Another 40 enemy warships would tip the balance beyond what courage and determination could overcome. We'll hold as long as we can, Elena said. Every day we buy is another day for help to arrive. Every Talnari soldier we kill here is one less for them to use against other human colonies. What Elena did not tell them was that she had received another message from Earth. The Colonial Defense Force was not just sending a rescue mission to Vestan Reach. They were mobilizing every available warship in human space. Admiral Sarah Chen, David Chen's daughter who had grown up on Vestan Reach before joining the military, was commanding the response fleet. The humans were coming, and when they arrived, the galaxy would learn something new about this species that lived on the edge of known space. As the meeting broke up and the officers returned to their positions, Elena remained in the command bunker with Administrator Chen. They sat in the dim light, two people who had spent years building a peaceful colony and were now fighting for its survival. "Do you think we'll make it?" Chen asked. Elena thought about the question. She thought about Jake and Sam Morrison carrying medical supplies through battle zones. She thought about Tom Morrison and his crew building bombs in the deep mines. She thought about Dr. Patel treating wounded soldiers who returned to fight the next day despite their injuries. "We'll make it," she said. "We're human. We don't know how to quit." Outside the bunker, the battle for Vestan Reach continued. In the tunnels and chambers of the asteroid belt, 50,000 humans continued their fight against an empire that had conquered the galaxy. They were outnumbered. They were outgunned. But they were not beaten. Not yet. The news spread through the galaxy like wildfire. On the homeworld of the Kethvar Confederation, reptilian diplomats gathered around holographic displays showing the battle at Vestan Reach. The images were hard to believe. Humans, the quiet species that had traded peacefully with everyone, were fighting the dreaded Talnari hegemony to a standstill. High Counselor Skrem studied the reports with growing amazement. "How long has this battle been going on?" 14 days, High Counselor," his aide replied. "The humans have held their colony against a force 40 times their size." "Impossible," Skrem hissed. "No species has ever resisted the Talnari for more than a few hours. The hegemony crushes all opposition." But the evidence was undeniable. Every day brought new reports of the fighting. Talnari casualty lists that would have been shocking in a normal campaign. Human defenders who refused to surrender even when surrounded. Children who fought alongside adults as if war was just another job that needed to be done. On the crystal world of Vorth Prime, the ancient crystalline collective emerged from their deep meditation chambers for the first time in 50 years. The Vorth were old beyond measure, a species that had watched the rise and fall of galactic civilizations for millions of years. They rarely involved themselves in the affairs of younger species. But the battle at Vestan Reach had caught their attention. Prime. Crystal Zerthak spoke with a voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "The humans fight differently than other species. They do not fight to win quickly. They fight to hurt their enemies." "What do you mean, Prime Crystal?" asked a younger Vorth. "Watch the battle patterns. Other species fight for territory, for resources, for dominance. When they see they cannot win, they surrender and try to preserve their lives. The humans fight for something else. They fight to make sure their enemies remember the price of attacking them." The Vorth's analysis was spreading through diplomatic channels across known space. Ancient species that had ignored galactic politics for centuries suddenly found themselves studying human behavior with intense interest. In the insectoid hives of the Zephyrian collective, Queen Mind Zika Theta processed reports from her scouts. The Zephyrians were traders and explorers who traveled throughout the galaxy. They had been among the first to make peaceful contact with humanity decades earlier. Now they were evacuating their frontier colonies. "The human response will be unprecedented," Queen Mind Zika Theta communicated to her hive sisters. "When a Zephyrian hive is attacked, we defend it. When we lose, we mourn and rebuild elsewhere. When a human colony is attacked, they will not just defend it. They will hunt down everyone who threatened their young." The evacuation of Zephyrian border worlds did not go unnoticed. Other species began to ask questions. Why were the peaceful insectoids suddenly abandoning colonies they had held for generations? The answer came from intelligence networks and diplomatic sources. The Zephyrians had studied human psychology and concluded that a new kind of war was coming to the galaxy. On Talos, the capital world of the Talnari hegemony, supreme war leader, Yexmore received daily reports from the battle at Vestan Reach with growing anger and disbelief. The conquest of one small human colony should have taken a few hours. Instead, it had become a meat grinder that was consuming his finest troops. "War Prime Zethkol requests additional reinforcements," his aide reported. "He says the humans have turned their entire asteroid belt into a fortress. Every tunnel is trapped. Every chamber is defended. They are using their young as soldiers." Gexmore's forearms clenched into fists. The Talnari had built their empire through quick, overwhelming victories. They would arrive at a world with massive force, demonstrate their power, and accept the inevitable surrender. Most species valued the lives of their people more than their pride. Humans appeared to operate under different rules. How many ships has Zethkol lost? Gexmore demanded. 7 warships destroyed, 12 more damaged badly enough to require extensive repairs. Ground casualties are approaching 100,000 soldiers. The numbers were staggering. The Talnari had not lost that many troops in their last 10 conquests combined, all because of 50,000 humans who refused to accept the reality of their situation. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, other eyes were watching the battle. The Void Stalkers, a mysterious species that few had ever encountered, observed the fighting with their advanced sensor arrays. They were nomads who lived in the dark between stars, studying other species and gathering information. The eldest of their kind, a being known only as the Watcher, transmitted his observations to the Hidden Fleet. The humans do not fight like prey. They fight like predators who have been cornered. This changes everything. Back at Vestan Reach, the battle continued with savage intensity. Elena moved through the tunnel networks like a ghost, leading raids against Talnari positions and then vanishing back into the maze of passages. The miners had become expert guerrilla fighters, using their knowledge of the asteroid belt to strike at the enemy from unexpected directions. The children of the colony had become an integral part of the defense. They were small enough to move through maintenance shafts and air ducts that adults could not navigate. They carried messages between isolated groups of defenders, delivered ammunition to besieged positions, and served as spotters for the human snipers. Jake and Sam Morrison, the 8-year-old twins, had become expert at moving through the tunnel networks without being detected. They had memorized every passage and chamber in their section of the colony. When a group of Talnari soldiers tried to advance through what they thought was an abandoned area, the boys led them into a trap that cost the enemy an entire platoon. Dr. Patel worked around the clock in the makeshift hospital, treating wounded defenders who often insisted on returning to the fight before their injuries had properly healed. She had seen courage before, but nothing like what she witnessed daily among the colonists. Adults and children alike seemed to consider the defense of their home a duty that transcended personal safety. Administrator Chen coordinated the civilian resistance from his bunker command post. He had transformed the peaceful mining colony into a war machine that consumed Talnari resources at a rate that was causing shockwaves throughout the hegemony's leadership. But Chen also monitored the reports coming from Earth and other human colonies. The response to the attack on Vestan Reach was building into something the galaxy had never seen before. Colonial Defense Force bases throughout human space were emptying, as every available warship raced toward the battle. The response fleet was commanded by Admiral Sarah Chen, who had grown up on Vestan Reach before pursuing a military career. She had played in the same tunnels where children now fought for their lives. The Admiral's fleet included not just military vessels, but also armed merchant ships, mining barges equipped with weapons, and even civilian transports carrying volunteers who demanded to join the fight. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. Word of the human mobilization spread through galactic intelligence networks. Alien governments that had dismissed humanity as another minor species suddenly found themselves revising their assessments. The humans were not just defending one colony. They were preparing to go to war over it. On a dozen worlds. Alien military leaders studied the reports and reached the same conclusion. Humanity was not like other species. They did not fight wars to gain territory or resources. They fought wars to eliminate threats to their people, permanently and completely. The Kethvar High Council met in emergency session. Should we offer aid to the humans? One counselor asked. High Counselor Scrim considered the question. The humans have traded fairly with us for decades. They have been good neighbors. But if we help them, we make an enemy of the Talnari hegemony. And if we do nothing? Another counselor asked. Quote, Rem looked at the tactical displays showing the approaching human fleet. It was larger than any military force the Kethvar had ever assembled. If we do nothing, we may find ourselves facing a human species that has learned to make war on a galactic scale. The debate continued, but the outcome was already clear. The galaxy's neutral species were choosing sides, and most of them were quietly hoping the humans would win. At Vestan Reach, Elena received a coded transmission from Admiral Chen's fleet. The rescue force was still days away, but the message was brief and clear. Hold on, we're coming, and we're bringing friends. Elena did not know what the Admiral meant by friends, but she would find out soon enough. The battle that had started as a simple conquest of one human colony was about to become something much larger. The galaxy watched and waited, unsure of what they would witness when the human fleet finally arrived at Vestan Reach. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the CDF battleship Terra's Wrath, watching the tactical display as her fleet prepared to drop out of faster-than-light travel. Behind her stretched the largest military force humanity had ever assembled, 350 warships from massive dreadnoughts to converted cargo vessels bristling with weapons. But the Admiral's fleet was not alone. HFY Confederation vessels are holding position on our starboard flank, her communications officer reported. Zephyrian collective ships are maintaining formation on our port side. The Vorth crystals are... Actually, I'm not sure what they're doing, but their ships are definitely here. Sarah nodded grimly. The news of Vestan Reach had done more than mobilize humanity. It had forced other species to choose sides. Some, like the ancient Vorth, had simply declared that they would observe the coming battle. Others, like the Kethvar and Zephyrians, had decided that a galaxy ruled by the Talnari would be worse than whatever the humans might do. Signal from the colony, the communications officer announced. It's Captain Vasquez. Sarah's heart clenched as Elena's face appeared on the main screen. The captain looked exhausted and wounded, but her eyes were still fierce. Behind her, the command center showed the scars of 3 weeks of constant battle. Sarah? Elena's voice cracked slightly. Is that really you? Hello, Captain. I'm here to relieve you of command. Elena smiled for the first time in weeks. With pleasure, Admiral. Though I should warn you, the locals have gotten a bit hostile. The fleet dropped into normal space at the edge of the Vestan system. What they found there shocked even the experienced military officers who had studied the battle reports. The Talnari fleet had grown to over 100 ships, but they were scattered and damaged. Many showed signs of repeated attacks. The asteroid belt around Vestan Reach was filled with debris from destroyed vessels and floating bodies of Talnari soldiers. The colony itself was still there, still fighting, after 21 days of siege. War-Prime. Zethkol received the sensor reports with disbelief turning to horror. How many ships? Over 300 human warships, his tactical officer reported, plus support vessels from at least 6 other species. It is the largest fleet ever assembled in this sector of the galaxy. Zethkol stared at the approaching armada. In all his years of conquest, he had never faced anything like this. The Talnari had always been the ones with overwhelming force. Now they were outnumbered 3-1 by an enemy that had every reason to want revenge. Open communications with the human fleet, Zethkol ordered. We will negotiate terms for withdrawal. But Sarah Chen was not interested in negotiations. This is Admiral Chen of the Colonial Defense Force. Her voice echoed across all frequencies. Talnari vessels, you have attacked a human colony and killed human civilians. You have one chance to surrender unconditionally. Any ship that attempts to flee will be hunted down and destroyed. The Talnari had never surrendered to anyone. It was not in their nature. Zethkol ordered his fleet to prepare for battle, believing that even outnumbered, his superior ships and weapons would carry the day. He was wrong. The battle that followed was not a fight. It was an execution. The human fleet moved with precision that spoke of careful planning and absolute determination. They did not simply attack the Talnari ships. They systematically dismantled them. Every vessel that tried to escape found itself cut off by human squadrons that had anticipated its route. Every attempt to form a defensive line was broken by coordinated attacks from multiple directions. The Kethvar and Zephyrian ships provided support. But the aliens soon realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. The humans were not just winning the battle. They were conducting it like a surgical procedure, methodically removing every threat with clinical efficiency. On Vestal Reach, Elena and her exhausted defenders watched the battle through their sensors. The children, who had carried ammunition through tunnels, now pressed against observation windows, cheering as Talnari ships exploded in the void. "Look at them go," Jake Morrison whispered to his twin brother Sam. "They came to save us." Tom Morrison put his arms around his sons. After 3 weeks of fighting in the mines, the gruff miner had tears in his eyes. Yes, they did. They came to bring us home. But the battle in space was only the beginning of humanity's response. War-Prime. Zeth Cole's flagship was the last to fall. As human Marines boarded his vessel, he found himself face to face with Admiral Chen in person. She was smaller than him, but something in her eyes made the veteran conqueror take a step backward. "You attacked children," Sarah said quietly. "Human children, on their home." Zethicol tried to maintain his dignity. "This is war. Casualties are inevitable when primitive species resist the hegemony." Sarah's expression did not change, but something cold entered her voice. "You're right. Casualties are inevitable. But you seem to have misunderstood something fundamental about humans." "What is that?" "We don't just defend our colonies. We eliminate threats to them." The surviving Talnari ships that had managed to escape the battle soon learned what Admiral Chen meant. Human fleets appeared throughout Talnari space, not to conquer worlds, but to systematically destroy every military asset the hegemony possessed. Space stations vanished in balls of fire. Shipyards were reduced to scrap metal. Entire fleets were hunted down and annihilated. The Talnari had built their empire through fear and overwhelming force. Now they found themselves on the receiving end of both. Other species watched in fascination and growing alarm as humanity demonstrated a concept that was alien to most galactic civilizations: total war. When the Talnari attacked Vestan Reach, they had expected to face the colony's defenses. Instead, they had triggered a response from the entire human species. Within 6 months, the Talnari hegemony ceased to exist. Their military was destroyed, their government collapsed, and their former subject worlds declared independence. The empire that had terrorized dozens of species for centuries was gone, reduced to scattered refugees begging other civilizations for sanctuary. The galaxy learned a new word: inimical. It was added to the official classification for humanity in every major database. It meant simply that humans were a species you did not want as an enemy. 1 year after the Battle of Vestan Reach, Elena stood in the observation deck of the rebuilt colony. The asteroid belt had been transformed into a fortress that could hold off a fleet 10 times larger than the one that had attacked them. New families were arriving every month, drawn by the stories of the colony that had refused to surrender. Sarah Chen, now promoted to Fleet Admiral, visited the colony on the anniversary of the battle. She found Elena in the same command center where they had first spoken during the siege. "Any regrets?" Sarah asked. Elena thought about the question. The galaxy had changed since Vestan Reach. Humanity was no longer seen as a minor species on the edge of known space. They were recognized as a major power, one that other civilizations approached with respect and caution. "The children ask me sometimes if we did the right thing," Elena said. "Fighting instead of surrendering. All those people died because we refused to give up." "And what do you tell them?" Elena looked out at the asteroid belt where Jake and Sam Morrison, now 9 years old, were playing in the observation areas of their family's home. They were free children, growing up in a human colony, speaking their own language and learning their own culture. "I tell them that some things are worth fighting for," Elena said, "and that sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to make sure your enemies understand the price of threatening it." Sarah nodded. The rest of the galaxy has certainly learned that lesson. Indeed they had. In the years since Vestan Reach, not a single human colony had been attacked by hostile forces. Pirates gave human ships a wide berth. Even the most aggressive species in known space had found reasons to avoid conflict with humanity. The battle had been won not just through military force but through a demonstration of human nature that had shocked the galaxy. Other species fought for territory, resources, or dominance. Humans, the galaxy now understood, fought for their families and their way of life with a intensity that bordered on the incomprehensible. As Sarah prepared to leave the colony, she paused at the memorial wall in the main corridor. The names of everyone who had died defending Vestan Reach were carved into the metal, from Captain Rodriguez, who had fallen in the first hours of the battle, to little Maria Santos, who had been killed carrying medical supplies through a bombed tunnel. But below their names was another inscription added by the survivors. They died as humans, free. The galaxy watched and remembered and understood that humanity was a species that would rather die fighting than live as slaves. It was a lesson that would echo through the stars for generations to come. In the darkness between worlds, the void, stalkers recorded the conclusion of their observations. The humans have taught the galaxy a new kind of fear. Not the fear of conquest, but the fear of consequence. They have shown that some species cannot be defeated because they refuse to accept defeat. The report was filed in archives that would survive long after the current galactic civilization had passed into history. Future species would read it and understand what had happened at a small mining colony called Vestan Reach, where 50,000 humans